Oh, I think that's a bit too high. What do you think? I think it's a bit too high. I think there's just so much headspace up there. I'll fix all of this in post. Guys, if you could jump on here real quick and just see if we can get the show on the road. By the way, for those of you that are interested, do you know that I was nominated, I think it's in 3 different categories, in the upcoming Zamtel Social Media Awards. Are you aware of this? Do you know this? Huh? Do you know the Zamtel Social Media Awards? Well, if you could head over to the website and if you could give us a vote, I'd be very grateful. I think we're in 3 different categories, and I would be elated. Nay, I would be ecstatic if you could give me a vote and sort of a check of approval, if you will. I'd be grateful. Just head on to the Zamtel website and do your thing. Guys, I'm over here at Simoson Building, and please tell me in the comments, the lane, indeed. Tell me that watching from Habaron, Botswana, our man Show. Do you know, I'm not sure if my hair is, I think my hair is combed, you know. Please tell me if my hair is combed. Tell me. Mwinga, hey Mwinga, how are you? So nice to see you. Guys, say hello to Mwinga for me. She is one of our very frequent SML TV participants. And when I see her and many people like her, people like Stacy B, Joseph Chishimba, people like Wazulu, so many of you that consistently jump on here and sort of give me some encouragement. I'm always grateful. Mwinga, always good to see you. Guys, do me a favor, if you will, just sling this broadcast around to people that you think would be interested in this conversation. I shan't keep you long because I'll have an appointment at 12:15 today. So I need to say what I need to say within 15 minutes, downstairs, in the car, out the gate, at my destination in 15 minutes. By a miracle, that is. So let's begin. The very first thing I want to talk to you about is Chilufya. Now, for those of you that may not know who he is, Chilufya has been a fixture on social media for many, many years. He's more than a provocateur. He's sort of a dissident, if you ask me. And I've had many brushes with him, but most notably, one of the things that he's sort of famous for is that he was very opposed, vehemently opposed, to not only the candidature, that's a tongue twister, not only was he opposed to the candidature of HH, he was diametrically opposed to the thought that HH could ever become president. So he was hired by the PF to do everything within his power to discredit HH in every possible way, and all of his efforts landed with a hollow thud. He literally fell on his face, including the people that sort of supported and funded his effort. And one of the things that he said, most notably, was this was right before the elections. Chilufya went on his page and he swore up and down that he would rather live in a foreign country. In fact, what he said was, I would rather, talking about himself, I would rather go to Ethiopia if HH becomes the president of this country. And let me stop there for a moment. Guys, let's be practical when we're making statements. Let's try not make sweeping statements. I know when we paint in broad strokes, we sort of risk discrediting ourselves when we paint in broad strokes. It's very, very, I think it's practical to sort of measure ourselves when we speak, especially on social media. So Chilufya swore up and down that he would rather live in a foreign country, specifically Ethiopia, and he would rather be taken care of by his wife than live in a country that is governed by HH. Tell me in the comments if you remember that. This was 2021, and you know, PF was in power in those days, and he was very bold in his pronouncements and the audacity, nay, the temerity of that statement. I would rather, he said, be taken care of in Ethiopia by my wife than to live in a country that is governed by HH. Well, the Zambian people woke up on election day, 2.8 million strong Zambians lined up on election day, and they ushered in a brand new administration. And guess who they voted for? HH. The very man that tayali said he would not want to live in a country where HH is presiding over as the president. When HH was sworn in, there was a bit of a lull. You know the word lull? L-U-L-L. There was a bit of a downtime for Tayali. It was a bit quiet. During that time, he was making attempts. He was trying to make inroads into the UPND power structure, because he realized at that moment that there was nothing that he could do, that HH was the president, against his desire, his wish. And so in an effort to safeguard himself and his family, he tried to make inroads. He tried to sort of bargain his way into the power structure of the UPND. Well, the UPND very quickly rejected him. Now, once they did that, that simply put Tayali into overdrive. He began to grow horns out of his head. He had this long, black, sort of fork. He grew a long red tail, and he became the devil. And he just went on a rampage. He started saying all kinds of stuff. One of the things that landed him in trouble was that he began to talk about the Zambia army and how that the army was disgruntled, and he sort of suggested in one of his live vlogs, he sort of suggested and hinted at an uprising from the army against the administration. Now, everybody knows that is in our laws, in our statutes, that's against the law. That can land you in a lot of trouble when you try to ignite or incite people to violently rise against a democratically elected government. In our laws, it's called seditious practices. Sedition simply means inciting people to rise against a government or a monarchy. For example, in England, if an Englishman were to be charged with seditious practices, it would mean that this person is trying to ignite or incite the British people to rise up against King Charles. The law prohibits that. Well, Tayali literally did that, amongst many other things. One of the other things that Tayali did was he accused a well-known chief of being the architect of the gassing. If you know anything about Zambian history, you remember that there was a time there was this so-called gassing going on in the country. Nobody really knew what it was. It was just something that people talked about. In my view, gassing never existed. It was just in people's heads. It was just this fallacy that people created in their minds, that there were people going around putting people to sleep. There was never any evidence that suggested that. Well, Tayali jumped on this bandwagon that suggested that there was a chief, a well-known chief. In Tayali's mind, that chief was one of the architects of the gassing episode. And so he was taken to court for that and many other cases. Well, a short time after all these cases began to build up, Tayali was sort of tipped by an insider, Kuti, you need to leave the country because you're going to find you're a little behind in prison. You know, these cases that have been built up against you are piling up and they're adding up. And if you don't leave the country, you're going to be in prison. Now, when Tayali left the country for several months, we didn't know exactly where he had gone and how he escaped the noose of justice is totally beyond me. He somehow slithered his way out of Zambia. From what we know, from what we understand, and from what we can see, Tayali is living as a fugitive. He calls himself a political refugee in Malaysia. That's our understanding. I don't know where he is. He could be in Cambodia. He could be in the Maldives. He could be in Bogota, Colombia. Who knows? I don't know. If you know, please tell us in the comments. And so he began to live as a political refugee in some Asian country somewhere, some far-flung country somewhere. And he continued his vlogs. He continued coming to the Zambian people via the internet, specifically via Facebook. And then he would spew this political rhetoric and these contentious comments that he would make on current political Zambian affairs. When Edgar Lungu decided to return to active politics, this was before he passed away, of course, Tayali was one of those people that was spearheading this idea of alebwerelapo, meaning he will return to active politics. And you guys know the story. Tayali stood on the highest mountaintop and he said, this is the only way our country's going to be saved, is if Edgar Lungu comes back and returns to active politics. Well, lo and behold, unfortunately, as many of you know, our sixth former president passed away on the 5th of June the 5th, 2025. When he passed away, the Tayali's funders, the people that were funding his livelihood in Malaysia, livelihood meaning paying for his rent, his food, and whatever else he was doing there in Malaysia, those people that were funding Tayali always made it clear that he was fine and that he would never want to come back to Zambia, and Zambia was a backwards country and that he had moved on and he had accepted that, he's not going to come back to Zambia. But what I found interesting and what I found curious was that when at one point he made it clear that he would move to Ethiopia and be taken care of by his wife, the question was, why didn't you go to Ethiopia? Because as you said, you would rather live in Ethiopia and be taken care of by your wife rather than live in Zambia, a country that is being presided over by the UPND administration, and in particular being led by one Hakainde Hichilema. Why didn't you go to Ethiopia? He's never answered that question. Well, the answer is simple, is that those Ethiopians would not tolerate a situation where his Ethiopian wife would be taking care of him. That one they can't accept. That one is not going to happen. That is total nonsense. So because the Ethiopians rejected that notion of their daughter taking care of this Zambian dissident, they rejected that in its totality. And because it was rejected in such a final way, what Tayali did was he decided to go to a different country. That is the reason they're not together. And that's just a fact. I know it sounds like I'm hating, but I'm not. That's just a fact. So now, after Edgar Lungu died, Tayali changed his tune. He sort of now started warming up to the idea and the acceptance that HH wasn't going anywhere, that HH had a tenure. HH was going to govern this country for 5 years in his first term, possibly, very strongly possibly, govern it again in 2026. We all know that is up to the Zambian people. The Zambian people decide. But the way it looks and the way it's going, we can safely say the Zambian people will re-elect Hakainde Hichilema. But again, notwithstanding, that still falls at the feet and the responsibility of the Zambian people. And I have it on good intuition that the Zambian people will give HH a second term. That's my view. You may have a different view, but that's my view. So when Chilufya Tayali began to realize that HH wasn't going anywhere in the immediate, okay, because there was this idea that, no, let us overthrow, let us impeach, let him resign. They're lunatics right now. There's a lunatic woman in England. Her name is Lily Lunatic Mutambo, who spends her whole day disparaging HH. That's all she does. She wakes up in the morning in a cold sweat, fangs coming through her mouth, long fingers, steel, icy fingernails, hair growing from the back of her head, red eyes, and all she does is disparage, insult, discredit HH all day, every day. There are people like that. And so Tayali now has been going through a physical challenge. He's not well. And how many people know that healthcare, it just depends on which country you're in. It's only when you go to other countries that you realize how, even though in Zambia our healthcare system may not be perfect, but you can see a doctor pretty much anytime you want when you go to the hospital in Zambia. Okay, that therein lies the difference between. I mean, in England, are you kidding? To see a GP, a general practitioner, a doctor in England? You can't see a doctor at the drop of a hat in England. They've got a procedure there as long as my arm. But even in this country, as inadequate as our healthcare system is, at least in this country, you can see a doctor anytime you want, mate. You can even call a doctor anytime you want. All of us, there are 6 degrees of separation between all of us. There are so many doctors that I know on my phone. I just call them, hey, listen, I've got this ache. Come on, come through. You go see the doctor. And the cost of seeing a doctor, comparatively, is negligible, compared to other countries. So now Tayali is going through what he calls abdominal pains. He says, look, I'm just not feeling well. And then he presents a bill. Now, let's be clear. I wouldn't put it past Tayali to fabricate this whole thing. He's done it before. When he used to live here in Zambia, he would always complain about money. And the moment he would do that, people would send him money. There was a young lady on our Facebook page that sort of suggested that this whole spiel, the word spiel, this rhetoric, this story that Tayali has concocted, where he's implying that he's so sick that he's standing on the precipice of death. In his last post, he said something like, it's better and the Facebook people being who they are, Zambians, you cannot go to Zambia online to solicit sympathy. Bwana, they will crucify you with a smile. If you read those comments on Tayali's post where he talks about the Kenje Kunga Ndana Alaya, Ama comments, I laughed so hard, my sides hurt. Some of the comments, Kuti, Nomba Iwenga Wafo Mriamurun, Nani Waratu Evat now, Fwa. Another comment, Guti, Manje Wenga Wafo, who's going to repatriate your boat? I honestly, I don't mean to laugh. I don't, and if in fact this is real, if this is true, if Tayali really is going through some type of ailment, okay, now I understand why people laughed when I was stoned. Because, comedy is tragedy in retrospect. Okay, I want you to understand that. Comedy is tragedy in retrospect. So I couldn't understand when I was stoned in the market. So many of you were laughing. And it really sort of bothered me a bit because I was thinking, look, I was almost killed, mate. There's nothing funny about that. But I now realize what it is. Comedy is tragedy in retrospect. And many of you made fun of me. And about Mama Chika Moneka, she laughed so hard. And then it was only after a while that I realized I understand why. Because in retrospect, it's funny. In the same vein, by the same token, Tayali claiming that, or saying, even in his post, the way he structures his posts, the way he says, that's funny. That's comedy. It's hilarious. Anyway, so now he has written an open letter to the president, to the head of state. And this is what I find strange about Tayali. In one of his posts, he was talking about how he was literally demanding that HH bequeaths, relinquishes, releases his salary and give it to Tayali. Tayali has no humility. He has no tact. He doesn't even know how to ask. He's got such a sense of entitlement, it literally oozes out of his ears. And he's completely unaware that he feels entitled. There is not one iota of humility in his body. Not one. It is the most incredible, amazing thing. It's very difficult to help that chap because he's so full of pride. Instead of asking with humility. And he refers to President Banankwe. This is what I find reprehensible about Tayali. When he refers to HH, he addresses HH like as if President Banankwe. And he points his finger, he does this. Umuntu is on the verge of ukufwa. Ala sanguke chitumbi. Ale pointa camera leti iwe HH iwe untumine salary yobe. What the hell, man? Where's the humility? None whatsoever. So now he's at his wit's end. Now he's saying, no, ndefo kubwera kuunganda, ndefo kubwera kuzambia, no mbashirefo amukankake. Again, a sense of entitlement. Tayali feels that the rules don't apply to him. Tayali feels, oh no, the rules don't apply to me. Well, it doesn't work that way. If and when he comes to Zambia, he will have to face the music, just like all of us do. None of us are exempt when we break the law. None of us. Not a single one of us. You must understand that. All right. Secondly, I want to talk to you about... What was the second thing? I want to talk to you about these false prophets. There's a young man, a false prophet, that came on social media, and he claimed he prophesied the results. Guys, let's just be clear. God is not interested in football results. Understand that. The word of God says, "Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel." Do you understand that? There's nothing in there about go and prophesy about football results. Uria kaka fake prophet kadia. Nika scammer. Edo kala becha. He occupies his time with placing bets on sports apps on his phone. There is nothing spiritual about that. Hear it from me. God is not interested in football. God is not interested in any type of sport. He's only interested in a transformed heart. That's all. That's it. Okay? Now, let me say something about the Copper Queens. Guys, yeah, we lost the game, but be loyal to the team that you support. Just because we lost that game, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It doesn't. Okay? So if you're a supporter of the Copper Queens, take heart. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Okay, sorry. I went off too deep into scripture there. I should have just stopped it. Let not your heart be troubled. Keep supporting the Copper Queens. Okay, I gotta go. Thanks for watching. Bye.